Hey, welcome to the Less Doing podcast, where we teach you how to optimize, automate, and outsource everything in your life in order to be more effective. You can find more at lessdoing.com. This is episode 67. I'm Felix Bird, and here's your host, Ari Meisel.
Thank you very much. Very well read. I like our new intro. Just two main announcements I just want to make before we get into the show is that last week I posted this on Instagram, but Change Collective was here filming a new course with me. I'm really psyched about this. Basically, Change Collective does this sort of one-to-many coaching model where you sign up for these programs. They're usually 2 weeks, and there's one about getting up earlier. There's one about I think eating healthier, and mine is about getting to inbox zero. So it's really like a multimedia thing. You're seeing videos, you're seeing instructions from me, and then they actually have plugins for Gmail that are going to monitor how you're doing and really make sure that you do it and get there. So I'm not sure when that's going to be launching. I think it's going to be this summer, but that's pretty cool. And then the other thing is that the mastermind group, I had my first mastermind group call this morning. So it is starting in full swing, and there's still room for people to get in, and it's awesome. The first call went so well. So those are the first two things I just wanted to talk about real quick.
Awesome. Cool. Should we dive into a question?
Yeah.
Okay. So Sarah writes from the UK. Can you recommend a virtual assistant company in the UK?
Okay. Basic question, but I actually have a sort of a full featured answer for that. So, and I'm kind of curious on your opinion on this, but no matter where you are in the world, you can obviously use a virtual assistant from anywhere. And my feeling is that first things first, no matter where you are, you should try to use Fancy Hands. I love Fancy Hands the best. And especially if you're in the UK, I don't necessarily see how there would be any issue there. You know, same language, time is not an issue. Time zone is not an issue because you have Fancy Hands working kind of all across the country at all hours of the day. So unless there's something very specific that you need from an assistant who is in the UK, for instance, I can't see why you wouldn't want to use Fancy Hands.
Well, here's my thoughts.
Let's hear it.
I think for the most part they would probably do really well. The only thing that might be a problem is just sort of location based issues, like they say, you know, trying to explain things about the local geography, or I'm trying to think of a good example, but it just something may arise out of a misunderstanding of that, or maybe even just sort of slight cultural differences could. I don't know. I can't think of any examples.
No. That's fair, and that's what I thought that you.
But
might
I remember heads because I would love to get my parents into using Fancy Hands.
Well, okay, I actually do have a UK solution, but so this is so my first line of defense would be to say go with Fancy Hands if you want an on-demand service, and if you want a dedicated assistant, I would still recommend virtual. Although then you are dealing with one person in one time zone. Okay. However, depends on the kind of stuff you need them to do. You know, like for me, for instance, for my human autoresponder task, that person could literally be anywhere in the world anytime. If you need someone who knows a little bit more of the local geography, maybe some of the culture, or they're going to be speaking to people on your behalf, then maybe you do want to look at someone local. So there is a company called Time Etc. And Time Etc. is actually, it's more full featured than a virtual assistant service alone. They actually put themselves out there as your basically like virtual managed staff. So through Time Etc., you can get blog writers, virtual assistants, copywriters, I think bookkeepers, and even marketing. Like basically, they have several talents that are available, and they manage the entire process for you.
Oh, cool!
But they are UK based, and they do have virtual assistants that are UK based. So, Sarah, that would be my recommendation. I've talked to them a few times. It's a really great team over there, and they're really, really big on quality control. So. Time Etc. would be my recommendation, and we have a link to that in the show notes, so you can check them out.
Cool.
So we got one more question, I think, right?
Okay, yeah. Mindy asks, I have about 7 years of files stored everywhere in Evernote, Dropbox, my hard drive, Google Drive, and email, with all types of naming formats. Is there a simple way of organizing, tagging, renaming docs so that they're all in one place or are easily searchable? What would you recommend for simplifying my archive now and creating a consistent system moving forward? I think I know what you're going to say.
You do, huh? Okay, well, let's see if I shock you then. So this is actually kind of complicated. There is a lot that can be done here, and there's several questions in here. So the first thing is, how do you find everything? That's the easiest question. And unfortunately, there used to be a really great service called Q. Well, it's called Q now. What was it called before that? It was called something else before that, but Q, which let you search across Evernote, Gmail, Google Calendar, your Dropbox, like Skype, all these others, like 15 different cloud services you could search from one place, and they don't work anymore. They're not around anymore. So there's a couple services that let you do similar things, and these are. I'm going to give you all of these, and the links will be in the show notes. But you're going to have to kind of create your own solution based on these tools. So the first two are Find It and Octonius. Now they're both. I think that they're both iOS based. Find It might be web based, but they essentially let you search across multiple cloud services from one place. So that's a first step, because if you have duplicates of something in Dropbox and on Google Drive, or you have things in your Gmail and your Evernote, it'll get complicated. So you need some place where you can search them all. So that would be Octonius and Find It.
Okay.
Then there's a service called Cloud HQ, and Cloud HQ allows you to set up automatic syncing between various cloud services. So you can actually use this to synchronize documents.
Oh, that's cool.
That's the one I was telling you about the other day, actually. So you can use this to, on the first hand, synchronize files between, for instance, Evernote and Dropbox, or Google Drive and Dropbox. But you can also use it to make it as a backup. So you can back up your entire Evernote, for instance, to Dropbox, which is something that I actually would recommend doing. In order to work on the tagging and the categorization, there's a service called WapWolf, which I'm going to add that to the show notes too. I forgot to put that in there. So WapWolf is it's an automation service that basically, it's not of the vein of IFTTT or Zapier. It's more of processing within the cloud service itself. So for instance, you can tell it that to take any file that has this particular name and rename it like this, and have a whole naming convention. You could also have it convert files to other files. You can have it move files from one place to another, all automatically. So that would be the one for starting to get them organized. And then the last one would be Sort My Box, which just works for Dropbox. So Sort My Box is something that also has these rules set up so that it will, now and going forward, if it sees something of a particular string or a particular extension, for instance, it can then move that to another folder, which is actually a really good segue. And I think you have a comment on this, Felix. I feel like you have a comment on this, but I want to just say one other thing is that on Instagram this week, and I have the link to that on the show notes, I posted my process for our podcast production, how it works. And it involves Sort My Box, WapWolf, and Fancy Hands, Zapier, Fiverr, and Auphonic, and about 3 other services, and it all sort of works very seamlessly. So essentially, when Felix and I do this recording, I rename the file with the word Felix in it, and it's in my Dropbox already. And when I do an interview, I basically call that an interview, and that's all I have to do. I just have to rename those 2 files, and then everything else happens automatically. Felix gets his information, we can do our audio processing, Fiverr transcribes it, all of that stuff happens in the background through this process. So you do have to sort of create your own solution, but these tools should get you there.
Yeah, cool.
So you had asked me the other day about a thing for backing up. So Cloud HQ, have you tried it yet?
No, I mean I've got everything backed up, across all the different machines that I have. So I have Evernote running on all of my different laptops and PC and my desktop computer, and I have that backed up in many different places, and I have that backed up offline. So I'm not using a cloud-based server at this moment.
Well, no, and that's a good solution too. And I used to do that as well. I actually used to keep a computer at my parents' house that was just sitting in a closet of theirs, and it was just my backup over the cloud.
Oh, well, that's great. I mean, that's like a great home server, which is a really great system for a lot of people who've got an old laptop lying around, and you could leave it anywhere, and that would function as a server. So exactly. That could be good.
And for that, Dropbox works great, SugarSync works great, or just is that what you're using, or are you using something else?
I'm using no, I mean I've just used the application, and just by having it on the hard drive, it backs it up to the files in the folder in the Finder, in the hard drive. Yes, absolutely, and it's a good point to make, by the way, that cloud services are great, and they really do make you kind of bulletproof. And if your house burns down, God forbid, like you're going to be okay with your data. However,
cloud services are still stored on a server somewhere, and it's a really good idea to have your own backup offline.
Or just to, I think something that's good to reiterate here is that Evernote, although it is a cloud service, it's not backed up. If someone were to somehow get into your account, or a number of ways, I mean, there are a number of conspiracy theories about what could happen, but someone could go in there and delete your whole Evernote account, and it would be completely gone. You wouldn't be able to get it back unless you have it set up by the methods we just spoke about. Another thing that's worth mentioning for any iPhone users, I don't know if you've had this problem. Have you ever lost a contact number in your iPhone contacts, which is supposedly backed up to iCloud? I've tried that. I mean, I've had that problem, and you can't actually get it back. It's not a backup. It's just another place where it's stored. So if you delete something, it deletes it there, and boom, it's gone, as far as I know.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that's actually, I mean, not to get too geeky about this, but when they first started having RAID hard drives, where it would immediately back up to the other hard drive, it's the same problem. If you had something go wrong with one that would be great if like a hard drive broke, then you have another hard drive with immediate backup. But if a hard drive got everything deleted by accident, then it would delete it immediately on the backup too.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So,
yeah.
All right, so there was some really cool stuff in the news this week. Well, actually, so this isn't news, but Fancy Hands has a Chrome extension now. And awesome. I'm pretty excited about it, actually. So first of all, you can just, on the basic level, you can just click the button anytime you want and open it up and add a new task. And that's fine. But what it's actually starting to do now is it will look, if you give them the permission, they'll look in your email every now and then, and basically they suggest tasks.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I was very impressed. There was like a meeting I had coming up, and it's like, well, we can give you a one-sheet preparation for your meeting, or like we can make that dinner reservation for. It's kind of weird. I don't know. Cool. I've always been one who like doesn't care about the privacy aspects at all, and obviously that might be an issue here, but it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah. So there was a article about Soylent. So have you seen Soylent, the food?
No, I haven't. Okay, no.
So
I did. Go on. I think I've heard about this.
Okay, so Soylent, this guy created Soylent. They've gotten $1 million in funding, and it's basically I don't want to say meal replacement. It's beyond that. It's supposed to be like a nutritional, all-encompassing thing, and it's a powdered food. So you drink it like a shake, and I think it's like 3 a day, and you're supposed to take some fish oil with it as well. But it's basically sort of being marketed as this like method of just having food. You don't have to eat. You just have this thing, and it's got all the nutrients you need. It's like the perfect food.
Okay.
So I've heard several people who've done experiments with it, and some have had good results, and some have had terrible results, like really bad gas and bloating, and like really bad headaches, or because you're not eating at all, no food.
Wow.
And
you could just sit there and work all day long with just like a milkshake attached to your
essentially
sip on a milkshake all day.
Essentially, my understanding is it tastes kind of like oatmeal, and not bad, but kind of like oatmeal, and this is like a long-term solution. Like it's not like a cleanse. Like you're supposed to be able to eat, just have this, and that's supposed to be all of your sustenance.
Probably wouldn't be very long before it would taste really, really, really bad.
Not to mention the fact that, so basically the only thing that you're not getting, which they recommend, is that you take a fish oil. And most people who've taken a fish oil have had that experience where they burp like an hour later and they taste fish. And so if you're basically having like oatmeal shakes and fish burps, I feel really bad. But
is it based all on soy?
No, it's not at all. It's based on it's from Soylent Green, the book Soylent Green. So it's like basically it's just a dystopian future, and like this idea of sort of, it's like the meal and a pill idea that all these movies from the 40s said the future was going to be like. But they did this study with rodents, and they were showing that there are actually really long-term problems, a lot of long-term problems from eating a powdered food base only. There's something apparently, so they had like hypertension, and they were getting like blood sugar issues, and even just acting kind of erratic. And what they believe from the study is that there is a digestive and sort of psychological necessity and benefit to chewing your food.
Oh, yeah.
So as basic as that sounds, like the act of chewing apparently is a part of the digestive process, and it signals your body that there's calories coming. It helps break up food. Like just having powdered food apparently misses a big part. So it's kind of
maybe
scary.
Chewing gum could help.
Yeah, right. So just have your oatmeal powder, fish burps, and chewing gum, and you're
chewing gum 3 times a day. You'll be fine. Yeah.
Exactly. So sort of along those same lines, I feel like, I don't know why, but these connected to me. There was a Times article. This guy did a no soap, no shampoo hygiene experiment.
Oh God.
So, well, no, but so it's pretty cool actually. There's a company called AO Biome which makes a skin probiotic, and what people don't realize, when you're using antibiotic soaps, antibacterial soaps, and you're constantly cleaning your hands and stuff, if we didn't have trillions and trillions of bacteria on our skin, you would wake up every morning with like a thick layer of fur on you, essentially.
Really?
Yes, as lovely as that sounds. So we need that bacteria. We need that beneficial bacteria. It prevents us from getting eczema, prevents us from getting other skin issues like collagen buildup. Even some skin cancers can be prevented by having healthy skin that comes from the probiotics. So the guy did the experiment, and he was using this this skin probiotic, and the result was really positive. He didn't smell too bad, and his skin felt much smoother. And I've talked about this before. I get wet every day, either a bath with the kids or I'll take a shower or something. But I typically only use soap at all, like once a week. So
really,
yes, and I mean I always had really bad eczema, and so I have sensitive skin, and we talked last week about the dry patch under the eye and the sugar scrub.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wet every day, either in the pool or the bath or the shower. But I just find that my skin feels better, and I don't smell bad, and like I just my skin's softer when I don't use soap.
Yeah, and I could let the other readers know that Ari doesn't smell too bad at all, and his wife certainly would not tolerate that if that were the case.
Yes, well, and I would expect you to be the first to tell me if I did, because we work out together pretty hard. So
it's true. Yeah.
Okay, so then I read "The Obstacle Is the Way" this week by Ryan Holiday, and Ryan is actually going to be on the show in a month, I think. But it's really cool. It's basically about stoicism and how stoicism being the philosophy is saying that essentially we can't change bad events or things that happen to us. We can only change our perception of them. So he gives all these historical examples of people who basically were met with a huge obstacle of some sort and then overcame them to become stronger. And I just thought it was really good. So I just want to put that out there now, because Ryan is going to be on the show and we're going to talk about the book more. But if you haven't read it, you can check it obviously on Amazon or Kindle, but you can also get it on Blinkist now. So you can read it in 15 minutes on Blinkist.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Okay, and then there was a couple more that I wanted to tell you about. One was this one I really liked. Okay, so there's a study about skipping breakfast. So there's all sorts of thoughts on this, and I think my feeling is that breakfast is the most important meal of the day not to screw up, basically. So the first meal of the day, whatever it is, whether it's what people call breakfast first thing in the morning or not, or later in the day, whatever your first meal is, I really believe sets you up for kind of the rest of the day and how your cravings are going to work, how your sugar is going to be. So me personally, as you know, I basically eat between 12 and 8. So I'm getting that intermittent fasting effects, and I'm not technically having breakfast. My first meal is a really, really big lunch. But what the study was finding was that people skipping breakfast was leading to obesity. But basically what the conclusion was is that the people in the study, Americans particularly, the breakfast that they were typically having was a really crappy breakfast. Like they would be having, sugary cereal and juice and not any good fats, or just, processed foods. So
wait, you're talking about the people who skip breakfast or the people who didn't?
People who skipped breakfast were getting more obese.
Okay.
So basically what the result was is that these people were not healthy to begin with, essentially.
I see, because they would normally have a really sugary breakfast.
Right, so they're eating a crappy breakfast, they were holding off, and then the meal that they were eating was like that much unhealthier, because they were basically just gorging themselves because they had no ability to sort of maintain that sugar rush or that sugar loss.
Okay.
So the study itself, I think, was a little bit flawed, which the person, I linked over to Subversity, and he basically admits that too. But essentially, the conclusion is that the first meal of the day, whenever you have it, should be a good one and should be a healthier one. So my huevos rancheros are going to be waiting for me when I'm done with this recording, or I'll have to make them. And then there's just two more things before, and then I wanted to ask you a question, actually. Well, not a question. I know you had a couple studies that you thought were cool. One was the Muse brain sensor. I don't know anything about it yet. I just know I want to try it. It's like a headband that can read it's an EEG essentially, so it can read how you're stressing and how you're thinking and how you're focusing, and give you feedback on an iPhone app, so you can actually do activities or do exercises or just see how different times of day affect the way that you're focusing, which is really badass.
Wow.
And it's like a $300 thing.
Wow.
So that I can't wait to. I'm going to see if they'll give me one to try out. And then the last thing is there's an article in the Next Shark about butter in your coffee and how like people are now putting more and more butter in their coffee which is really due to the Bulletproof executive and Dave Asprey.
Now this is what you do every morning, right?
This is what I do when I have coffee. I have coffee probably once a week.
Oh, okay.
But yes,
so you're not having your butter in your coffee as your breakfast type thing anymore.
Right. Well, so if I've had like a rough night or I have a really big day ahead of me, sometimes I'll have that Bulletproof coffee in the morning.
Okay.
And just to be clear, a Bulletproof coffee is a trademark thing. A Bulletproof coffee is with upgraded coffee beans, which is Dave's beans, and upgraded MCT oil, which is his medium chain triglyceride oil, which is derived from coconuts, and 2 tablespoons of butter, typically Kerrygold grass-fed butter. He likes to use the unsalted kind. I actually like using the salted butter. I know that sounds weird to put that in my coffee, but I really like it. I think it gives me like a little bit more electrolytes and just more taste. But basically, the article is just talking about how grass-fed butter is giving you vitamin K and how it can help with neurodegenerative diseases, anti-inflammatory. You get conjugated linoleic acid, which is from the grass-fed butter and helps to bring down body mass. So there's all these benefits to having butter in your coffee. And if for any of those who are thinking, wow, that sounds terrible, try it because it's awesome. Even your wife liked it when I made it for her.
Yeah, I think I've had a sip of yours. It was pretty good, but I think I need to try the whole thing.
It's a nice little process. So anyway, there was a couple of things that I didn't put in my show notes that you found interesting, right?
Oh, and also just on that note, I should mention, because you buy the Bulletproof upgraded coffee K-Cups, right?
Yes.
And it's worth knowing that they make those for those people who are into the K-Cups.
Absolutely.
I'm not, but I'm sure many of our listeners are, because it's very, very efficient.
Well, you're a very, very, very dark tea drinker. I know that. So.
Yes, it's from tea addiction. That's all it is. Yeah.
But there was like 1 or 2 that you thought were cool.
Oh yes. Yeah. Well, I love the one about the Google gloves that you put on, and then and it teaches you how to basically play the piano in a nutshell, without you knowing it. I'm sure you can explain it much better than me, as we'll be here all day if I give it a try.
It was basically these gloves for learning a new skill really quickly, and it did like electrostimulation and vibration very specifically to essentially maximize muscle memory by like 1,000% or something.
Yeah. So what I think it does is it plays it will send little electric shocks to your fingers in the same order that it would be if you were playing that melody on the piano, so it knows which keys you're going to play. Now, as a musician myself, I thought this was fascinating, because what it does is he puts these gloves on for 2 hours, and then at the end of it, he sits down and they say, okay, play this song. This is the one that it's been doing. And after a very short while, he can do it. And I thought this was really interesting. And then I was especially interested because I wonder if you have 2 gloves, one of the biggest challenges to playing the piano is using both hands at the same time.
Right.
And I would be really interested to know how that works.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Anything that can shortcut learning, I think, is always amazing. And this one is...
It's a big one.
It's a big one. And it's interesting, too, because in a way, it's like you're almost disconnecting the motor skill from the mental skill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like for me, because when I used to play the piano, which is never well, and I haven't played in years, but I always did it by memory, and I almost remember like not thinking about it ever. I would just play, and the notes would come out. But in a way, well, yeah. Actually, what do you think about this? So, are you disconnecting like the feeling and the passion, and then you're just technically playing, basically?
Well, I think one could see it like that, but this is rather clever. It's what it's doing is no, I don't think that would be the case at all from what you're saying, because that's up here. You're never going to take that away. What it's doing is it's just shortcutting that process of muscle memory. Now, to be an amazing piano player, there's no big secret, or any musician, you have to practice for hours and hours and hours,
Right.
and you've got it. And the only process you're doing there is to get that muscle memory. The feeling and emotional part is something that you decide on and work on, but the whole the rote learning process, if you will, that comes through just through playing that over and over and over again. And that's why these guys practice for hours and hours a day. It's the only way you can do it.
Yeah, I think it's actually it's a fascinating area of exploration. But all right, so we're just about out of time here for our port. So the interview today is with Dan Abbate, who has a company called Robotaton, and he is an automation ninja. I was really impressed. I had a really cool time talking to him, and I know you're gonna like this interview. So, Felix, thanks.
No, I can't wait. I can't wait to see this interview as well. So I'm going to listen to it now.
All right. Well, we will see you all next week.
Okay. Thanks.
So now I'm speaking to Dan, who is the founder of Robotaton. Hi, Dan.
Nice to see you.
You too. Thank you for talking to me. I love talking to people who are into automation. So why don't you tell everybody, first of all, what Robotaton does?
Sure. What Robotaton does is we focus on end-to-end business process automation. So what that means is that, we look at companies and figure out how we take everything from their first customer interactions in their CRM all the way through production, all the way through invoicing until there's, income coming in on the other side. The idea is to hook up as many of those systems as possible with our cloud-based platform that lays over the top of all of that, and automate everything in the middle. Take as many human hands out of it as possible.
Okay, so have you created a custom solution, or you you sort of mix and match, or how does it work?
It's our system is proprietary. It sits, like I said, it sits on top of the either the current infrastructure, depending on what they're using software wise and hardware for that matter, or we build specific custom modules. Usually it ends up being a combination of both. Each, depending on what area and what they're using. Sometimes they're using stuff that's really antiquated. A lot of times they're using, Excel spreadsheets or something like that, which is just not where they need to be. And so we'll build something completely new from that, so it just depends.
So, I'm a huge fan of IFTTT and Zapier and stuff for automation stuff, but it sounds like you're really taking this to the next level.
Yeah, it's our assumption that in the future, most companies will have to be, if not fully automated, as automated as possible in order to stay competitive. There really should be no people. There should be nothing being done in a repetitive fashion by a person. It's just we're kind of past that, and that's kind of what we're preaching.
Yeah, so it's funny to have you say it that way, because a lot of times when people are asking me I recommend virtual assistants to people a lot, and most often someone is like, well, I don't even know what I would have them do, and I'm like, what'd you do today? It's like, okay, well, there's 6 things that you can probably have done, because people don't seem to realize that the repetitive things are you can optimize them and automate them, but also they don't even realize what is required to do them a lot of times, I feel like.
I think the thing that's interesting is that because people don't think in terms of automation, they just think in terms of doing, that it's almost a habit to just do, and especially then when you start getting up into these, we're working with a lot of mid-market companies. So you're looking at companies that are, 10 million in revenue and up into about 100 million in revenue. So these are sometimes getting to be fairly substantial companies. And so they're just so focused on the day-to-day, what needs to be done and the way it's always been done,
right.
Just the way we do it. And then that they don't see the, tons of opportunity to utilize, computers to actually do a majority of the work that they're doing. And then a system like ours or other systems, they do it better than people because it's just more competitive. It's just faster. It's more accurate. It doesn't screw up. It doesn't take a vacation. It's all that sort of stuff.
Right, of course. And so you don't do much outsourcing stuff, right? You're really focused on the automation.
Yeah, that's really that's our focus. Yeah, I actually met a guy who kind of summed it up pretty well, which basically said that, when we go into a new company to do something, the first thing we look at is, can we automate it? then can we outsource it? And then, in worst case scenario, we'll hire somebody locally. So,
okay, no, and you know what? I love that because my process, my less doing process, is to optimize first, then automate, and then if there's anything left over, then we outsource. So that's great. And actually, on my I think it was my last episode of the one before that, I was talking about my version of spring cleaning, which is where I go through all of the things that I have people doing and try to see if I can automate them.
That's actually a really good point. And that's something that we do as well, because we found this to be the case, that even companies that are a little bit proactive on the front end to actually do automate some of their processes, or all of them if we can get them to do it, there also has to be a regular maintenance effort that goes into it, because businesses change. Things change, on a yearly basis, let's say. Yeah. We go in and do an audit to make sure that there hasn't been little things that have crept up and tacked onto the side of the automated system that somebody's doing manually and feeding in. So you just got to keep your eye out for that stuff, because you always got to be, like you said, spring cleaning basically, and make sure that everything stays optimized.
And it's also cool. I mean, so in addition to offering this as a consulting service, you actually go in and buy companies and automate them and sell them, right?
Yeah. That's really how the company started. That's really been that was our history. We look for companies. It's funny. You'd go look at a lot of times people are specific industry focused or whatever their niche is, and we'd always say that our niche was companies that have the most screwed up processes. So the more screwed up they were, the more antiquated they were, the more potential value we can extract from that inefficiency. And so we'd buy them, fix them, and then sell them again.
And what kind of industry? I mean, do you have a focus, or what kind of companies are you working with?
Certain industries work better. It's not necessarily particularly focused on any industry, but there are certain ones that are better. For example, ones that are not good a lot of times are professional services like CPA firms, law firms, those sorts of guys, because they're basically they're actually essentially a creative business if you really think about it. They really do only one. They work in one area. They don't have a lot of to make a billable hour. They don't have a lot of process involved. They work in their one little area, as opposed to, for example, ground transportation. Ground transportation has a lot of moving parts. It's got a lot of employees. It's got a lot of equipment. It's got a lot of GPS-enabled things that you can, tie into, all the way through down, to keeping track of your customers and the customer feedback. So there's a lot of, so those types of companies that have a lot of elements to producing that dollar are the ones that are usually the best fit for what we do.
Gotcha. Now, so one of the resistance that I get sometimes about this stuff is, what about the jobs that you're sort of giving up? And so, I mean, I have a feeling on that, but I'm curious what your thoughts are about that when people say that.
I get that question a lot. I do a kind of a future of automation talk that I'll do to different business groups and different community groups and stuff like that. And that question comes up a lot. And I think the thing that's tricky about it is that in the past, technology has always created new and better jobs for the people that it displaces. Although I think in this particular instance right now, I think technology is on kind of an exponential curve where the process at which it's creating new jobs is probably more on a linear line. So I think that's where the disconnect is going to come in the short term, because technology is moving faster than it can create new jobs for people. So I think in the short term, I think there's going to be some bumps in the road. And I think we're already seeing those bumps in the road, basically just in the downturn that we saw a few years ago in the global economy. And that the fact that now the economy has rebounded, but we haven't seen any new jobs. I think the reason we haven't seen any new jobs, or very many new jobs, is due to the fact that when those companies got squeezed, they automated and they increased their efficiency so much that then when revenue and everything started going back up again, they didn't need to hire anybody back. So I think we're starting to see these effects already, and I don't know what the solution is going to be, but I do think there's going to be some bumps along the way.
Yeah, and it's actually pretty similar to what I usually say is that if an automation that I help create or that someone does put somebody out of a job, then they probably weren't efficiently allocated as a resource anyway, which is not only about the business, that person is probably bored in what they were doing, And so it's not like, oh, now they have to go. I mean, yes, it's not the best economy to look for a job, but maybe it gives that person an opportunity to look for a job that they're actually better suited for and hopefully can make more money at.
Absolutely. Yeah. The thing that's interesting about that is that if you redeploy people into things that can't be done by computers, you're actually making much better use of them as people, because if a computer can do it, it's probably pretty boring. It's
Right.
probably pretty terrible.
Right, exactly. And that's why it almost, I mean, even if you look at like industrial processes where there's robots now, doing welding and stuff like that, it's like, well, you're safer because you're not doing it. The machine does it faster, and you do have a skill. Maybe you can do something, It's about efficiently allocating resources, and I don't mean to refer to people as resources, but it is kind of how you have to look at it when you're looking at a business process.
Yeah, well, that's how the economy looks at people too. I mean, it's called human resources in in businesses and the economy. So yeah, you have to really look at what people are best, how to best utilize people. And usually if you're utilizing people well, then hopefully they'll be better off for it as well.
Yes, of course. So what does the process look like? Like when you go into, and I mean, actually, we probably have some war stories we could share, because I've seen some unbelievably ridiculous processes with people, including one. Actually, I'd like to share this first, just to give you some context. This guy, I was looking at a company that a client wanted to buy, and they sold a product, and they were taking online orders, quote unquote online orders. Basically, someone would send an email with the order, and the guy would print out the order and place it on his desk with a piece of tape. And then they would prepare the order, he'd charge the card, then he would wait 5 days to let the card charge clear. Then that piece of paper would come off of his desk on one place and get handed to someone else and then process the order. So, needless to say. So how do you like approach it? Is it like a shotgun effect, or like what do you look at first?
Well, usually what we do is we look at that manual process that you just described there. Like we would actually have somebody or usually multiple people in the bigger company, is we'd walk through the entire process piece by piece. And sometimes, a lot of times what ends up happening too is these companies go in and out of manual processes. So maybe you'll come in over on the CRM side. Here's how we made our initial contacts with the customer. Now we've got them as a customer. And now the paper goes up on the guy's desk. And it goes from a software thing into something that's on the desk. Okay, now we're waiting for so-and-so to enter them into the accounting system so we can keep track of how we're going to bill them. Okay, and now, she was on vacation, so a week later it gets entered in, whatever the situation is. So we just kind of track and order a customer through the entire system of the company. And then, some of these companies are, like for example, one of the companies that we purchased was a legal video production company, a company that did video for lawyers. And so there was a lot of, scheduling and planning out in the future, like, hey, this is when all this stuff is going to go down. So the scheduling system that was in place was completely manual. I mean, they were managing, 30 different videographers on this big giant manual calendar where they're scratching stuff out and writing it back in, and then because things are always changing, and then they'd have to send updated information to both sides of the attorneys. So you'd have attorneys on two sides of the case, and then of course you'd have the videographer and the court reporter. We'd manage the videographer, but everybody had to get all this information and get it all on the same page, and they were managing all of that between basically one set of forms was like in a Word doc, which they'd keep changing all the fields, all of the items manually, and then they'd change a PDF manually, and then they'd fax it to this guy, email thing, all manual. So they had to do, so if something had to be changed, they'd do it in 6 different places. Because you had to do it in 6 different places, but they do it manually. And so walking through and seeing all of that, we just basically did the exact same thing. We just copied the manual system and then just let the computer do all of it. So honestly, the system they had in place was, for what it was as efficient as it could be. It was just slow and error prone, basically, and very easy to make the computer do it. So that's what we did.
Gotcha. Does it ever? Do you get shocked anymore ever?
No. Well, usually where I get shocked the most is the size of the companies. Like a lot of times you think, oh, okay, a little family, $1 million company or whatever, I'll accept. You can pretty much accept whatever. But then you get into a 30 million or a 50 million or $100 million company. There's a company I saw was 120 million something in revenue. Big company, a lot of 300 plus employees, that basically had a whole accounting department dedicated to having all of their guys out in the field like physically calling them and telling them what they're doing, and then these people would like enter it into the computer. And so they had this big like call center basically of bookkeepers that were just calling and it was just it was a big company, a decent sized company. It was a very profitable company too, and they just that's the way they did it. And that goes back to that's the way we've always done it. You know, a company was 50 years old, and that's how they did it originally, and they never changed. So.
Yeah, so for a company that's just starting out now, you know, and this is another thing I see all the time is they're like, well, you know, we'll put the processes in place once we start to grow or once we get bigger or whatever. It's like, how do you, you know, what do you tell them? Like, how do you start now so that you can become scalable?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, the key there is what you said is how you can become scalable. We have people that come to us at the point that they realize they're not scalable, and then they're freaking out because they want to grow. But the answer to that is it's never too early to start putting these processes in place. It doesn't matter if you're a one-man show. If you're a one-man show, you should be looking at what you do on a daily basis, and again, automating as much of it as possible. Because if you get into that thought process early, then as your company does grow, well, for one, you're going to be more profitable right from the beginning because you don't have to keep hiring people to just, you know, incrementally grow. You might be able to exponentially grow and still just be one person or a few people. But then, yeah, I mean, the key to it is to get into that frame of mind as early as possible, and then just look at it and look at every little detail. There's a thing called, I can't remember. It's one of the lean things from Japan. All the auto plants use it. Kaizen, something like this.
Kaizen.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the idea. Like just like constant improvement, constantly looking for, you know, each little step. Why did I take 6 steps to go over there? Maybe I should take 5 steps. You know, like it seems crazy, but if you really get into it, you can really accomplish a lot.
What's like one of your favorite projects? Like one of the coolest, you know, weirdest maybe automations that you or businesses actually that you've been able to help automate?
Well, I like to use that video one as the example because we did the most. It wasn't the biggest company that we've done, but it was the one that we got the most. You saw the biggest like example of change. That one in particular, because what we did is again, we got these manual system in place where they're sending all this information around. So obviously we got rid of all that so that the computer was just sending everybody information. But that wasn't that big of a deal. What really was cool was all the video guys had equipment supplied by the company. All of the video guys were 1099 independent contractors. The company supplied the equipment that they needed. So we had control of their equipment basically. And so with that control, we inserted GPS tracking units to each of the boxes of equipment that they had. And what that allowed us to do is allowed the server to keep track of where these guys are at any given time. So that means that now the server can forecast if somebody's en route when they're supposed to be en route. So, or if they're moving to where they're supposed to be, or if it looks like they're going to be late based on looking like, hey, here you are now, it's a half an hour to where you're supposed to be, but you're 50 miles away still. What's going on? So it really allowed the server to really take kind of full control of everyone in the system, so that way then it wasn't just managing information, it was actually managing the people that were operating in it. So the people became ancillary to whatever the system was requiring at that time. And so like basically would say, you know, hey, it's watching constantly. It knows that the guy's supposed to be over here in an hour, and it knows that it takes an hour to get there. Why isn't that batch of equipment moving yet? You know, hey, it should be moving. And then it sends out a text, and it sends out an email, and it says to the guy, why aren't you moving? If it doesn't get a response, just a click to respond, kind of, oh, I'm on my way, blah, blah, like 4 or 5 stock responses. But if it doesn't get a response, it bumps it up to the manager, the person who's supposed to be, who can physically call and be like, where are you? What's going on? So that way there's always this constant real-time perspective of what's happening in the company. And when we did this, we ended up eliminating, there were 8 people to begin with in a 1,500 square foot office, and we took that down to 1 person in like in a single room office. And then that 1 person wasn't even that busy anymore, because that person just handled anything that was out of the ordinary. All of the regular stuff was once that deposition or video, whatever they were videoing, was scheduled, that's it. The server took over. And unless there was some sort of issue, the person never had to do anything with it again until the server says, here, print out this invoice and put it in the mail on the other side.
Right.
So that was that's a pretty cool one.
That's awesome. All right. Well, so the last question I always love to ask people, and I'm particularly interested to hear your response, is what are your top 3 personal tips for being more effective? What and it can be, from anything you've ever learned or done, but like, what is it that the 3 things that make you more effective?
Top 3. That's pretty interesting. That's a tough question.
Take time.
Well, the first thing that I would say is don't get bogged down in all the things that you can do easily. I have a tendency, and I know that it's human nature, to kind of do all the stuff that you can do easily first. Like, I got a bunch of emails I should respond to. So you do those first, and then you spend your whole day just doing all the little baloney business that is really not that hard to do. And then you say, oh boy, I had a busy day. I worked all day today, and look what, I got all this stuff done, but you really didn't accomplish anything. You just did stuff that was easy to do. So switch that around, basically. Instead of just doing the easy stuff first, do the stuff that you have to put some thought into. Do that stuff that you can do. Don't let the easy stuff bog you down. That's number 1. Probably the second thing I would say is that kind of along those same lines is don't do everything yourself. You get a computer to help you, get something to help you. If it's not a computer, get a person, get an outsourced, like a VA or something like that. Get people to help you. So again, that you don't get bogged down in miscellaneous, stuff that distracts you, basically. Like if you're running a company or you're starting a company, you should always be looking in a forward moving sense. You should always be thinking, that I'm working on the business, not in the business. If you're working in the business, you're going to run out of time real fast, and you're not going to get there. And then third one, I have to make sure you're doing something that you have fun with and that you really like.
Great.
If you don't like it, then it's not gonna be doing you any good. So
and you're gonna be automated out of what you're doing. So
yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah, if you're having fun with it, you can't teach a computer to have fun. So you got to make sure having fun is part of your job description.
Cannot teach a computer to have fun. Absolutely. So Dan, we're going to put this all in the show notes, but give us your URL and Twitter and wherever people should follow you and find you.
Yeah. Check out our website. It's robotaton.com. That's robotaton.com. We've got our blog on there, and everything else is linked on there as well. We've got some cool videos and stuff coming up too that should be posted in about the next week. So check it out.
Okay, great. Well, Dan, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Sure. Thanks a lot.